You'll just need it for 1 minute later in the intro. All right, well, hi, everybody. I'm Agustin. I've seen some faces here before. We could just do a quick round of intros with like your name, pronouns, your relationship with Community Board 4. Hello. All good. Do you want to grab a snack and a survey and a book? We are just getting started with introductions. And yeah, so and then the last question for the intros is just a question that you have about affordable housing. So yeah, I can go first. I'm Agustin. I use he and they pronouns. I am a staff member at CUP. And a question I have about affordable housing is why is it so difficult to change zoning laws? It seems like that's holding us back from building a lot of affordable housing. So yeah, which direction should we go in? Could you kick us off?
Sure thing. My name's Christian. I'm a CB4 non-board committee member. And a question I have about affordable housing is how we go about determining the most cost-effective way to build new units, because the need for new units is undeniable, and there are so many different ways of constructing or incentivizing the construction of new units, and there must be trade-offs to each, so I wonder what that calculation looks like.
Hi, I'm Ben Tucker. I'm a CB4 member. I'm on the Housing and Land Use Committee. I use he, him pronouns. The question I have about affordable housing is why are so many people willing to get in the way of building it?
Hello, my name is Wilfredo. I'm a long-term resident of this community, and the question I have with affordable housing is, why is it so unaffordable?
Celeste, District Manager, CB4, she, her pronouns, and my question is actually a question that was asked the other night in our committee meeting by one of our board members, Milagros Sandoval, and the question was, what does affordable housing mean to the mayor, and what does it mean to the community? Thought those were great.
My name is Robert Camacho. I'm the chairperson of CB4. My question is, when are we going to have the affordable housing, really affordable housing? We need to stop having meetings and make sure that we get the job done. We can't keep waiting.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ms. Navoa, resident of Bushwick, and also Community Board 4 member. What is affordable housing to me? That I'm still trying to figure that one out. And I hope that if we do get affordable housing, they will keep family in mind and not just build it for one person or two.
Okay, those are great questions. So hopefully we can start to talk about some of them today. Please bear with me today. Normally I give this workshop with my colleague, Ani, but they are out sick today. So we're just gonna take it nice and easy. And yeah. So yeah, a little bit more about CUP. Well, first of all, this is the part 2 of an affordable housing workshop that we did in the summer. Some of y'all were here, but for whom is this the first time that they're coming? Okay, so about half of y'all. Great. So the first half of this workshop is going to be pretty familiar for folks that were here in the summer. But then we're going to talk about some different affordable housing programs than we did the last time. So hopefully you can still get something out of it. So I'm from the Center for Urban Pedagogy. Our mission is to use the power of art and design to increase meaningful civic engagement. We work with designers and community organizations who work with marginalized communities to create visual materials that help break down complex policy issues that impact those communities. So Envisioning Development Toolkits is a program that creates interactive workshops to explain key concepts about land use in New York City. And these workshops support meaningful public participation by helping community members understand technical jargon and city processes, empowering them to organize and advocate for equitable development in their neighborhoods. And so far, CUP has developed toolkits that explain zoning, affordable housing, and the uniform land use review process. And over the next couple months, we're going to be doing all 3 workshops with CB4. So hopefully we'll see you at zoning and ULURP. Zoning is actually next week, and ULURP is in December. So yeah, this one today is affordable housing. And so this workshop covers the technical definition of affordable housing, and it looks at how it plays out in a particular neighborhood. Today we'll be talking about Bushwick, of course. And we'll also discuss a couple affordable housing programs and understand the nitty-gritty of how they actually work. And we'll wrap up today's discussion by looking at the distribution of affordable housing in an actual development, so we see how it actually plays out. So before we start the workshop, I want to play a quick game, which is the same questions that are in your survey, but if everyone could just hold up a fist, we'll play this game fist to 5. And if your answer is very much no, you keep it a fist, and if your answer is very much yes, you make it a 5. But just do the first number that comes to mind. How would you rank your understanding of affordable housing in New York City? Fist to 5. Sorry, how would you rank your understanding of affordable housing in New York City? Oh, yes. Do you have a question?
So if you're asking about like programs for affordable housing, I feel like my answer is higher than my knowledge of financing for affordable housing.
Oh, wow, Celeste. You're this is, I'm going to bring a special, you get a 5. Just for that question, you're a 5. That's a 5, Celeste. All right, you can go ahead and mark your answer in the booklet. Okay, so you can mark your answer on the before side. We're going to play this game at the end as well. So yeah, mark your answer. The second question is, how confident would you feel speaking up about affordable housing in a public setting? Great. All right, that's perfect. So yeah, mark your answer on the before side, and then you can put this survey away. You won't need it for the rest of the workshop until the very end. All right, thank you guys for playing along with me on that. So let's get into it. We're going to start with what does affordable housing actually mean? So affordable housing can be confusing because we all mean different things when we say affordable. What's affordable for me might be different from what's affordable for you. And there's actually a technical definition of affordable housing that impacts what kind of housing gets built and who can afford to live where. So there's 2 parts to this technical definition, and you might already know the first part. Sometimes you hear people talk about how much of your income you're supposed to spend on rent. Does anybody know what that number is? 30%, that's right.
Oh, 30%?
30%, yeah. If 30% or less of your income before taxes goes to what you pay for housing, and 70% or more of your income goes to everything else, then your housing is, technically speaking, affordable. So if we look at this big color bar in the middle of the chart, the numbers on top are annual income, so that's 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And the numbers on the bottom show how much you should be paying for rent if you make that amount. So if you make $40K a year, you should be paying no more than $1,000 a month. If you get $60,000 a year, you shouldn't pay any more than $1,500 a month, and so on. Of course, if you make like up to $200,000 a year, then you shouldn't. Then you can pay up to $5,000 a month for your housing.
I have a question.
Yes.
And my question is, so it doesn't mean the bedroom size or nothing, is the apartment size and their income, or how does that work?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's whatever you can get for. So if you can get a 3-bedroom for $2,000, that's just the maximum that you should be paying for your housing. In a minute, we will put up some markers for what a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom apartment might cost. Yeah, not talking about square footage right now. Just how much it costs. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say I make 40 and I'm paying 2,500.
Mm-hmm.
So what? I mean, so I'm living in unaffordable housing.
That's correct.
That's it.
That's all I'm saying. Yep,
That's it.
that's all we're saying right now.
There's no you can't go and apply to the government for a subsidy, or you can't do anything.
Well, you could get on a list to receive an affordable apartment. Yeah. Unfortunately, over 50% of New Yorkers pay more than 30% of their income on rent, and almost a third of New Yorkers pay more than 50% of their income on rent. So there is a lot of house poverty. So you're considered house poor if you pay more than 30% of your income on rent. And that's a big problem here. So just like incomes differ, we all have different incomes. Housing costs, as you know, also vary. And this variation happens across the country. So the federal government has created a way to standardize what affordability means for different areas of the country. So for every city in the US, the federal government calculates a number called median family income, MFI. Sometimes it's also called area median income, or AMI. So here's how they do it. Imagine you take all the families in New York City and you line them up from lowest income family on one end to highest income family on the other end. The median family income would be how much the family right in the middle makes. So median just means that half of the families make more money and half the families make less money. So when you see median family income, it's usually shown for a family of 4. So what do y'all think the median family income is for a family of 4 in New York City? Yeah, well. Right. So this chart is a little outdated. This was made in 2020. Or actually, these numbers are from 2017, excuse me. So in 2017, the median family income for New York City was $95,400. That's a great question. I don't know what it would be if we remove the outliers. However, let's open our books to page 28 real quick, because that number actually includes more than just the 5 boroughs. It doesn't include Westchester, but it does include Putnam County. So New York City has a couple of ways that it inflates the median family income to make it higher than what it actually is. One of the ways is including Putnam County. So if you remove Putnam County, back in 2017, the MFI was closer to 65,000. The one reason that's given to include Putnam County and inflate the median family income is so that more families can qualify for affordable housing. And the reason it's said that they do that is because New York City is a place where the housing costs are so outrageously out of proportion with what people make that by inflating the MFI, you get people who make up to this amount, who make up to this amount qualify for many affordable housing programs. So the idea is that more people can apply for and get into these housing. But of course it means that, then the focus becomes on people who make up to nearly $80,000 rather than focus on people who are in need of deeply affordable housing. How do you mean? Yes.
It would be more affordable, let's say, to a family on the higher end of that spectrum, but if it was considered based on the average of 76,000, then it's way less affordable.
Right. Well, you
people
wouldn't
below.
qualify for that apartment unless you made that amount of money. So if you made 80% of the MFI, you would have to pay 30% of your income. But if you made 50% of MFI, then you would only be expected to pay 30% of that.
It discriminates against low-wage people.
Right. It's taking emphasis away from the lowest wage people in order to include a broader spectrum of people. Yeah. So that is the technical definition of affordable housing.
Is the federal government determined?
Yeah, it's the. Does the federal government determine who?
What families what boroughs or what counties are included? I mean, can New York City determine by itself that the MFI,
That's right,
MFI
MFI, good.
is going to be calculated based on the 5 boroughs alone?
Yeah, that's a great point. Currently, it's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, the federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, that determines the MFI for each area. And yeah, I think that's a great point. I think advocating for more localized MFIs is a way to create affordable housing for each community based on what it needs.
Or including areas where there's a lot of low wages.
Sorry?
Or including areas where there's a lot of low wages.
That's right, that's right.
Include Bangladesh or something.
Or removing the outliers could be another one.
That's, yeah.
So yeah, as we touched on, New York City is one of the few areas in the country where housing is so expensive that government adjusts the income categories upwards so that more families and developers can qualify for affordable housing subsidies. And it means that you can still make up to that amount and qualify for affordable housing. So this number, median family income, is important because when we talk about affordable housing, it's always going to be in relation to that number. You'll hear people say this housing is affordable for families earning 30 to 50% of MFI. So between these two in the red, or between 50 and 80 in the brown. These are the categories, these are the official categories. They're also known as, they also have other names like extremely low income, very low income, moderate, middle, and high. But you might hear these less because the percentages are used more. So as you all already know, when we talk about affordable housing, we always need to ask affordable for whom? All right, we're gonna do a warm-up activity where we are talking about jobs and putting some pieces on the chart to understand how much people are making, so that we just remember that this is all about people and not just numbers. So can I get a volunteer to come up here? All you got to do is call out these jobs and then get help from the rest of y'all to know where to place them on the chart. All right, Ben's gonna. All right.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. Yeah, like I know not to be a middle school teacher. Okay, so what is a construction worker, caseworker? Yeah.
Beauty.
Yeah, it depends whose car you fix. Okay. Oh, yeah. How much for an auto mechanic? 50,000. All right, what do we got next?
Okay,
Security guard. Yeah, that's $40,000. Software engineer. Oh, these are different jobs than last time. Wow. Okay. It's good software. No. Real estate developer.
Oh, man. There you go. Put it outside. Put it outside. Especially if it's a crooked one, too. They get two of those.
Thank you so much. All right, we've got some numbers that we looked up. Obviously, a lot of these professions can range depending on what school you're working at. But I'll just readjust these according to the numbers that we have from back in 2017. So for security guard, we've got it at about 36,800. So I think y'all were spot on. I'm just going to shift it up here, but leave it in the same place. That's right. This is 2017. For middle school teacher, we've actually got it at 79,000. That, yeah. In 2017, yeah. Must be charter because you guys seem pretty convinced. For auto mechanic, we've got 47,000, so that you guys were spot on. Let's see, for the social worker, we've got it at 60,000. What's that?
This is in our area, in New York.
Yes, in New York City, yeah. Yeah. Spot on. I mean, that could be anywhere up here, but. And you're right. The real estate developer would be out in the hallway. It can stay down there. Yeah, so just a reminder that these would be for salaries for a family of 4 people. So we can assume that these people would be the sole breadwinners in their families of 4. So yeah, for this.
That the 30% will kick in from that. Would that mean that the 30% will kick in for the 28, the 47, and the 76?
That's
but
right.
not over 45, over 95, 4, right?
Well, we'll get into it in a
Oh,
minute, but
okay,
there are some affordable housing programs that allow for people making up to 115% or even up to 175% of MFI to qualify for some affordable housing. But remember, they're always paying 30% of their income on the rent. So
But
if
that's
you,
what I'm asking. They pay 30% of their rent. So everybody over here, they all get a.
in general, affordable housing programs are for people who make up to 80% of MFI. So most of them are geared towards everybody who's going to be on this side. But there are some, and we'll look at some of them today, that go up to 175% of MFI. Of course, they're not paying the same amount as these folks. They're still paying 30% of their income, but it still means that they can qualify for that housing rather than pay, like, you know, whatever the free market can ask for. So yeah, let's actually look at who's living where along this spectrum, and we're going to be focusing here in Bushwick. So I do need another volunteer to come up, and this time we're going to be putting little colored squares above the chart. All right, Camacho's going to do it. All right, we're going to be doing these squares. And we're going to start with the number of extremely low-income families that are here. So our number from 2017 is 8,954 families who are in the extremely low-income category. So each one of these squares is going to be worth 1,000 families. So we're going to put 9 squares up here. Yep. This is, that's right. This is 9, this is, sorry? Oh. Well, that's okay. This is for, these are 9,000 families that make less than 30% of MFI living in Bushwick. Yep. So we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Perfect. All right. So now we've got 4,731 families in the very low income category. So let's round that up to 5. So we'll put 5 squares here in the very low income category. That's 5 there in the red, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right, 5. Great. In the low income category, there are 4,915. So we're going to put 5 brown squares. Here, I'll give you the brown squares. That's right. In the next one after the red.
So that's 5.
Yeah, that's 5. Do you have enough? You need one more?
No, I'm right. I'm not talking to you. You flunked your class. That's it. doing a good job, right?
You're doing a great job. That's
Why you
perfect.
trying to confuse me, man?
All right. We need 3 squares in the moderate income category because there's 3,366 in the blue. We're going to round that one down to 3.
I want to ask you a question. So if we're doing this, right, you think the people that are supposed to be doing affordability, you think they don't see? You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like we're doing this and we know.
So if I can just paraphrase that question so folks can hear. Mr. Camacho wanted to know that the developers that are in the neighborhood, are they aware of this information when they're constructing buildings? Do they know that this is the reality?
Yeah. The thing is, they don't really have to know because they're not responding to the needs of the people in this particular neighborhood necessarily. We'll get into an affordable housing program in a minute that shows what the developers are actually faced with. But they're not coming into an area and saying, you know, who do we need to build for? That's not on their agenda. They are responding to affordable housing programs that are set by the city, state, and federal government that are independent from this. That's a great question because you might say this MFI doesn't really apply to Bushwick. You might say if you take the MFI of Bushwick, it would be really different. In fact, we have the number here. What's your guess? 52? Any other guesses? 42. 42, so less than half of this MFI. Which means that if we were to take if we were to redo this for Bushwick, this chart would look really different because this number would come way over here, which means that these categories might get divided up even further because there would be more people considered. Oops, sorry.
If we consider from very low to low and up, and it wouldn't be extreme. Yeah. Oh.
All right, let's finish putting these up on the board. We've got 2 squares that go in the green because there's 2,462 families. And then we've got 827 families. So we're just going to put 1 square in that category.
What is the green again?
So the green is middle income families. And there were 2,462 families who are making between 114 and 190,000 according to this MFI. The 827 families in the high income category living in Bushwick. All right. Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Is this how y'all think of Bushwick? No. What's surprising about it? Not surprised.
Well, I'm like a little surprised because if I see it like that, imagine how city agencies and cities that are negotiating these things with these developers, what do they see and what is it that they want to do in regards to seeing something like that? You know, what is in their minds to say, well, I'm going to assume maybe that we don't need these people. We're going to make more money on the other people. My suggestion.
I see it shifting. The yellows are getting less, not because they're moving up, but because they're moving out. And the others on the other extreme right are getting larger because for whatever reason, their housing costs are affordable because they make a lot of money. That's how I see it.
I think there's also a question of accountability and advocacy. So, whose responsibility is it, perhaps outside of the community, your community board, to really address this and to ensure that whether it's addressed through development or other programs, that it's not just gone by the wayside. Even though developers may come in, not pay attention to this information, how else are we holding folks accountable now that we have it?
Maybe by in my philosophy, by saying like other communities says that not in my backyard, that's not what we want and that's not our prices and this is what we want, and creating the narrative and what we want compared to what they want, I guess.
It's also like, I think it's important to remember that we're having this conversation. Sorry. It's important to remember, I think, that we're having this conversation about housing, but like what's up on that board is so much bigger than housing. And when it comes to any type of social service or healthcare, like all of that is impacted by what we're looking at. So it's frustrating to look at.
Yeah, those are some great points. For our next activity, we're going to look at how much apartments actually cost in Bushwick so that we can compare that with how much people actually make in Bushwick. So I've got a really easy activity for somebody who's been wanting to come up, but they don't want a hard one. All right. All right, we're going to depend on the expertise in this room for this one. So for this one, we've got a one-bedroom apartment, and we'll put these down here where the tip is pointing up. So how much do y'all think a one-bedroom apartment would go for right now in Bushwick? Like if you go on Zillow, you're looking for a new apartment, right? Yeah, we'll do right now because it's too complicated to do. 2017, no utilities. 22? Does anybody agree or think it should be more? That's perfect. Great. Okay, what about a two-bedroom apartment? All right, perfect. And what about a three-bedroom? All right, thank you so much. That was perfect. We do unfortunately have to slide some things to the right, but this was based. Okay, great. This is based on a really quick Zillow search, so this is not official, but as we were looking, we found one bedrooms averaging around 2.5. Sorry, 2,500. Sorry. For the 2-bedroom, we were seeing for 3,000. Yeah, $3,000. And for the 3 bedrooms, 3,600. So y'all were really close there. And yeah, so a reminder that these are 2022 numbers from right now, and then the rest of these are 2017 numbers. So it's not apples to apples in that sense. But it's still useful to see that there's a disconnect between how much housing costs and how much people in the neighborhood make. So we can assume that a family of 4 would want at least 2 bedrooms, which means that a family of 4 would be paying at least $3,000 a month. But what it means is that everybody on this side of that can't afford to pay for a 2-bedroom apartment. So, but we do know that these families are living here. So what's going on? How are they able to afford their rent? So that's one for sure. There's a lot of rent-burdened people, so a lot of people paying more than 30% of their rent. Doubling up, overcrowding. Overcrowding happens for sure. What else? What else could a reason be? That people are able to live in Bushwick even though the rent is so high. The hustle. That's right. They definitely do. Another reason could be that they live. These are all like new apartments that are on the market right now. It could be that they've lived here for a really long time, and so their rent hasn't caught up to these levels yet.
So that was kind of my thought earlier. It depends on who you're renting from. So if you're renting from someone who does not live in the neighborhood, who's just like a larger property owner, has like a real estate company kind of renting out something that was recently renovated, it's going to be more expensive. But if you know folks who have been in the community for a very long time, they own their property, more likely going to have a reasonable rent. So.
That's exactly right. And another reason could be that people are living in substandard apartments that might be illegal even, and for that reason they're charging below market rate because they're not up to code.
My question is, if you're, so I have a 2-bedroom, and I have 4 people living in my bedroom. So I'm not in compliance under the buildings department because I have more than people living in a 2-bedroom than I'm supposed to have. Is that fair to say? So if I have a 2-bedroom, there's 5, and I have 6 kids, then what? Then the city, how do they?
Well, if you were to apply for an affordable housing apartment, they would pair you with an appropriate housing size. So in that case, they are looking out to make sure that the apartment is the right size for your family. On the free market, I don't think people are following up on that or checking. So it allows for overcrowding or for people to double up in spaces to be able to afford the rent.
That's why some of these old houses that live in Bushwick, we have fires because you have a lot of appliances, a lot of things, and people putting refrigerators in bedrooms, and they're putting stoves or the heating because they're using it as a kitchen instead of a bedroom, and you're seeing that the wattage can absorb all that, and it creates fires. Electrical system, because too many people, and everybody think that is because we don't want them to be in situations like that. It's because one, can't go anywhere. This is what they can't afford, and two, the grids aren't powerful, and eventually, God forbid, something happens. Now they got to go. Now the developer changes it, and now he really is going to configure it the way he wants to make more money out of it.
That's right. For the rest of the workshop, we're going to talk about affordable housing programs that interrupt this free market housing price in order to make the price more affordable for people who can't afford this. In the first part of this workshop, we focused on a certain kind of affordable housing program, a group of affordable housing programs that subsidized housing in a really similar way. And that way was through tax breaks and low interest loans that would incentivize developers to build affordable housing in their neighborhood. We looked at the low income housing tax credit. We looked at 421A, which actually, right around the time that we were giving the workshop, ended. And we looked at Ella and Sarah. Those are, you don't have to know the acronyms, but the main idea there is that the way they worked is that the government would say, hey, developers, we're going to give you a tax break if you make a part of your building affordable. And reminder, it wouldn't be the whole building. It would just be like 20% of the units need to be affordable. And so what developers do is they would make a plan and say, okay, this is how we're going to finance it. We're going to make this many units affordable. A lot of developers are competing for those tax breaks. And if they get it, they can actually have a project that will make them money and create affordable housing at the same time. Today we're going to be talking about a type of affordable housing program that incentivizes developers in a different way. So in every neighborhood in New York, there are zoning rules that limit the size and the density of buildings. So we're going to be looking at voluntary inclusionary housing and mandatory inclusionary housing. And these are programs that allow developers to build bigger than what the zoning in that area allows for if they create affordable housing. And it has to be a certain amount of affordable housing. So let's say the zoning would only allow you to build like a 10-story building. Through voluntary inclusionary housing, developers would have the option of building, let's say, a 16-story building if a certain percentage of those units were affordable. So let's get started with voluntary inclusionary housing. And I'll stick this one up on the board. So this is a city program that lets developers build bigger buildings and gives them tax breaks if they reserve some of those units for affordable housing. In Manhattan, this has been happening since 1987, and it's throughout the 5 boroughs. So as we were just saying, zoning laws limit the size and type of buildings that can go in different neighborhoods. Voluntary inclusionary housing gives developers the option to build larger buildings in exchange for creating some affordable housing. That's right, building more square footage. So it applies to high density areas of Manhattan and a number of other places in the outer boroughs. Developers typically get a 33% size bonus if they set aside 20% of the units for families at or below 80% of MFI. A size bonus? It means that a 33% size bonus means that they can build up to a third larger. So let's say, they have permission to build a 100,000 square foot building. If they opt in to voluntary inclusionary housing, they can build a 133,000 square foot building. And in exchange for that size bonus, because in that size bonus, they're going to get to build more housing, which they get to sell to make more money. But in exchange for that more money that they can get, 20% of the units in that whole building have to be for families that make at or below 80% of MFI.
So if they get 20%, they have to bill it below or MFI. 80% does not have to be.
That's correct.
And that is the money that they're making.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's still advantageous for them to do this because they make it another 13%.
Right.
That's market rate.
Right.
Is there any traction towards raising the inclusionary housing?
Oh, of course.
So if you can build 100,000 square feet, it goes to 133,000. 20% of that is 26,000. So it's
20% of the whole building. Correct.
so it's close. Yeah, it's close to what they add.
That's right. That's right. That's right. In some special districts, that's great.
How do we, huh?
20% affordable. You get some affordable housing. You get some, but you don't get a lot. But they get a lot, but you get some.
That's right. We can put it up on the board with some of these dots. So let's say there was they accepted it. They built 133,000 square feet, and in that they got 100 units. There's 100 apartments for sale. Because they opted into voluntary inclusionary housing, 20 of those units, let's say each of these is 10, has to be in this price range, and they have to go to families that are making this much, that wouldn't be paying more than 30% of their income on rent. But it means that the rest of them can be for whatever they can get for it on the free market. So it could be that they're all up here.
Technically, that's not supposed to happen, but there have been cases. So to clarify, make sure everyone can hear. So stating that if they're like, there's a building that has the majority of a private rent or market rent versus the affordable rent, that they wouldn't have access to the same amenities, they would have different entrances. There were issues with this program, I think dating back to around like 2015, 2017. I think that the city has been really aggressive on trying to minimize that now. So most folks that are in these affordable buildings on the lottery system have access to the amenities, although some of the apartments may be different.
Thank you, Celeste, for that. Sorry.
Some of them you see the backyard, you don't see the skyscrapers.
That's a good point. So that's voluntary inclusionary housing. It was an option for developers to.
That's for the good guys, supposedly.
Well, you could argue that they're in it for themselves too. That they would only do it if it's financially viable for them.
So they do it out of their own interest.
Out of their own right, the interest. Yeah.
Has anybody done the numbers in regards to what it would cost, the weight of money to just get that little bit compared to all the money they get if you won't give it to them? You understand what I'm saying? So let's say for instance we say no, and we do the rough figures in regards to how much money they will make just on the basic that they get. And then we say yeah, and we get the rough figure how much we save for our right. And then we calculate that, more or less, what we're getting out of that deal. And sometimes that deal doesn't look good at all. Sometimes you rather take the loss on that and not give them the height, because later on you can make it up somewhere else where you can get somewhere that's technically deeply affordable, where the next person can make up for that overhead on that. You understand what I'm saying?
I think so. You're saying who's running the numbers to see if this is actually financially viable? Because it could be that it's not financially viable for them and they don't go for it and they just want to not take the bonus and build and sell everything for as much as they can.
Correct. So I'm a developer. I come in there and I say, let me do my math, because they do the math, how much they can save. So guess what? We throw them a little bonus. We get X amount of dollars in tax breaks, and all the breaks that we get, does it weigh?
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to why mandatory inclusionary housing exists now, because not many developers were going for it. Yes.
And that is, so the affordable housing under the voluntary concept, does that stay affordable forever?
Yes, it does. For this program, it does. For other programs, it doesn't.
Also, different residential zones have different types of height requirements. Does this apply to all residential zoning or just some of it?
That's a good question. I think voluntary inclusionary housing doesn't apply to all districts. I think this is specifically for high-density areas that are already quite dense. But that's a good question. I wouldn't know specifically which districts in New York it applies to. But yeah, I think Mr. Camacho raises a great point, because this program wasn't working very well. I think it was designed thinking that it would be financially beneficial for developers, and developers thought it wasn't worth the headache to go for this, or maybe it wasn't enough extra money, and they were often saying, no thanks, I don't want a size bonus. I will just build according to what the zoning permits me to build right now. So in the de Blasio administration, they wanted to make it mandatory for developers to include affordable housing in their new developments, which brings us to mandatory inclusionary housing. This next one is a little bit more nuanced than voluntary inclusionary housing. So this is the last one we're going to talk about today, but it has a few different parts to it. So to recap, most modern programs work the way voluntary inclusionary housing does, by offering some incentive to developers to build affordable housing. But the voluntary inclusionary housing didn't work very well. Not many developers took the optional bonus. And so they created MIH, mandatory inclusionary housing. And this is usually applied in places where new development is going to be allowed through a rezoning. So what that means is that if an area is being considered for rezoning, it gets a mandatory inclusionary housing asterisk on that rezoning. So let's say that a mandatory inclusionary housing would be applied to Bushwick. Which areas do you think, which income categories should that mandatory inclusionary housing be for?
$60 below.
60 below. We've got an 80 below. And do you think that mandatory inclusionary housing should be 60 or below or 80 or below in every area of New York City, or would it depend on what the housing or what the income distribution is in that area?
I was going to say devil's advocate. I think you should, because that's why we are where we are to begin with, because there is, a segregation when it comes to housing.
Yeah, because they move from over there and come here where it's cheaper.
The developers and the east side are not going to build anything. They're not. I mean, they're just going to say, "Thank you very much. Have a good day." No, thank you.
So this is something.
Yeah, but let me play the devil's advocate. All right. When Bushwick was burning, there was none here. The city was giving the houses away for $1. Nobody wanted. So now because outside was a little extra, and there was going up in Manhattan, and Williamsburg was gone, they moved over here because it was cheaper and everybody came here. So if you don't do it that way, then you're gonna get. If everybody were to live the same way in the same area, guess what? We'll have a balance in regards to housing, and also the people that can afford to live here can continue to stay here. They won't leave like everybody left because they couldn't afford to live here.
I also think they still will build on the Upper East Side because the amount that they can charge for the market rate units is going to be enormous. And so it'll still be profitable even if the city were to force them to build below market rate units. And I agree with Celeste's point that we need to avoid the segregation that is caused by only building affordable units in neighborhoods that have low income residents, because that just keeps those neighborhoods having low income residents.
Right. Okay, I'm also going to play devil's advocate. If I'm a real estate developer and you're going to force something upon me like that, it's true, I'm just going to walk away. You have to also have choices. And as much as painful this is to us, because I do fall in many of these categories, I can't afford half of this rent or anything, you still have to have choices. And this is not something that's new. You got to really take this back almost 80 years ago with the red line and everything that went on. And it's a shame. We have to also remember our past so we don't repeat it. But we also have to be very realistic where we're living nowadays. I mean, it would be perfect if across the board we all can have something like that. But in reality, we're human beings. And there's always greed out there. So, I mean, we just could come to a middle ground. That'd be great. Because, yes, a lot of our brothers and sisters are hurting out there. But at the same time, it's true what Mr. Camacho said. When Bushwick burned, nobody cared. But who would have known 40, 45 years later that this would be a diamond now? Nobody. I mean, if I knew back then, I was a kid, but I would have gone around with my dollar. But nobody could predict. No one can predict where we're going to be 30 years from now. We may have, God forbid, go back and have another city burned down. So it's a very hard choice and a painful one.
I just had one other thought. I think one of the most challenging things when we have these types of discussions is always talking about the market reality. So I know that Zuma referenced this in the sense of our general reality, but the market is dictated by the people who own the properties. And so when you have a community that's trying to rise up against that, to reclaim their community, what does that look like? What do you do when you have folks that have portfolios full of properties now taking and purchasing, and folks are feeling burdened? They don't want to, have to deal with all of the quality of life issues, the stresses, and it's much easier to sell, cash out at $2 million now, go somewhere where you don't have to deal with it. We're struggling to keep folks here. So I think that there's a much larger ecosystem, but again, it goes back to beyond what we do at a local level. Where's the support? Where are the resources for us to be able to navigate this situation and still support those that are most vulnerable?
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. When the city was designing mandatory inclusionary housing, they were thinking a lot about this too. Your point about there being choice was really important, and you'll see it in a second, how there is still some choice for developers to decide how they include affordable housing in their developments. And at the same time, just a reminder that this is not affordable. This is not a requirement to make their entire building affordable. It's still just a fraction of their building. So they are still making a lot of money off of all of the units that they can make, that they can build for the free market. It's slightly different. It's between 20 and 30%, but mandatory inclusionary housing has 4 different options. And so we're going to pop these up real quick. I'm going to start with number 1 and number 2. Okay. So this top one is mandatory inclusionary housing, option 1, and it targets families at 60% of MFI. Some of the units have to be built at 40% of MFI. Hold on, I'm going to shift this up. I'm just realizing. All right. All I was doing was I wanted to line up this line with the 60 and this dotted line with the 40 and this line with the 80. And the reason is that MIH option 1 targets families making 60% of MFI, but it's required that they make some housing for 40% of MFI. Sorry, let me get my book. And yeah, so option 2 targets families at 80% of MFI. Yeah. The nice thing about 95,000 is that it's more or less 100 MFI is about $100,000. 60% of MFI is about $60,000. 40% of MFI is about $40,000. So for the purposes of today, you can know that it's that's what we're talking about. But when we say 60%, it's always in relation to whatever this number is. So this is the number in 2017. Today it's like 133,000. So this would be a different chart if it were updated. That's a great question. The way this is going to play out, y'all are asking all the right questions here. When an area goes through a rezoning and it receives an MIH application, meaning that new development there has to build affordable housing under this program, developers get to choose, or the city first applies whether it's option 1, 2, or 3 and 4, which we haven't gotten to yet. It says which MIH options apply in that area. And these are the 2 middle ground ones. So every area will always have option 1 or option 2 or both. We'll look at option 3 in a second, which will target lower income families, and option 4 in a second that applies to higher income families, as in higher than this, but not the high income. So every area could have when a developer arrives to an area to build a development, they'll have to see which MIH options apply to that area. It could be 1 and 3, or it could be 1, 2, and 3, or it could be 2 and 4. The developer then gets to choose which one it builds for. And depending on which one they choose, they each have a slightly different percentage of the building that has to be at that income level. But they're all really similar. So for option 1, it's 25% of the building, so a quarter of the building. For option 2, it's 30% of the building. So it targets a higher income range, 80% instead of 60, but more of the building has to be for that income range. For option 3, let me just get these up here, it's 20%. And for option 4, it's also 30%, same as option 2. So I'm going to put these up. Okay, yeah. All I did there was add option 3 and option 4. And as we were saying before, 1 and 2 are the more middle ground ones. Option 1 is going to target families at 40%, and option 4 is going to target families at an average of 115%, but with requirements to include housing for families at 80% and 60%. Yes.
Is the data available for which of these options are most commonly chosen by developers?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Is it probably option 4?
Well, yeah, in zones where option 4 is an option.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like they get closer to the market rate.
Of course.
Even if it is 10% more units,
Right.
it's almost like not making them affordable.
Right.
Like I said, I would like to see the numbers. I would like to see the money. I would like to see how much and how it benefits compared to someone that's making less and they're getting less apartments as to they're making more and making more money in regards to, and see where the city says that you rather have some than none. We rather have none if it's just, if it's benefiting them and they're making more money and building more. So it's got to be that it's benefiting them because they're using this system, right?
Right.
Yeah, like they pat themselves on the back for building affordable housing that's not affordable, but it counts towards affordable housing because it's not started over again.
Right. So reminder that not all of these options will be available in every area that receives a mandatory inclusionary housing overlay. So
My question is in regards to, in regards to section in the community in Bushwick or Bushwick in general? Because, you know, it depends. Like if you're more closer, is Bushwick more closer to Williamsburg with the market, with some of those are tied to, you know?
So if I can attempt to answer that. So right now, there isn't mandatory inclusionary housing in the majority of Bushwick. The areas that have it have either been rezoned or are going through a rezoning, but there's no contextual zoning, which is what's required in order for MIH to even be an option. So the whole conversation that we had during the Bushwick Community Plan process, right, was to contextualize the zoning in order for MIH to be an option for developers when they're in the neighborhood. But right now, we have the Rheingold rezoning as one example of a building or buildings that has already been built. And then we also have, other examples that have come up recently, like 1601 DeKalb. We also have the Saddam rezoning. Those were contextual, and now they will be, eligible for the MIH program.
Broadway and Linden.
Broadway and Linden is a private development, so it's as of right, they can develop with or without subsidy.
So you said that the Rheingold was rezoned, but they didn't have to participate in that?
So they did. So yeah, it was rezoned, and because of that particular situation, the original owner and community benefits agreement was essentially tossed in the trash when they sold the property to a new developer who decided to still include housing, but very different from what was originally discussed. The irony there is that the Rheingold project is still the most affordable Bushwick has seen in the last 5 years because it was the last one at 60% AMI. All the other projects have been at 130% AMI due to the 421A program. Perhaps some 80%, somewhere in there, but the majority, the vast majority are at 130% AMI.
Wow, thank you so much, Celeste, for that. I did not know about that. To recap, when there is contextual zoning that then brings MIH, not all of these options will be available in every area that receives MIH. The city will decide which ones are more appropriate for that particular area, depending on what the income distribution of the folks in that area is. So they will always apply either one or two. That's mandatory. It could be both or either one. So you can guess that if folks are, if the income distribution in that area is closer to 60%, they will be assigned MIH option 1. But if it's higher, it could be assigned option 2. And then 3 and 4 are optional. They could be added or not at all. So if deep affordability is needed in that area, you could, it might receive MIH option 3. And then from there, once the options are on the table, the developer can choose which of those it follows to build its building.
So you said the city will decide. Is it not automatic based on the demographics of the neighborhood? It's like a decision that...
That's a great question. I actually don't know the criteria that the city uses to determine it. I'm sure it would be great if they had rules that made it automatic depending on what the income distribution was in that area.
Does the city council member get an input in these decisions?
That's a great, I can't add any more to that.
They normally, city council normally goes, I'm sorry. City council normally goes to the council person that's in the area because he knows the area, so they vote. It would be voted in on that to approve it or disapprove it. Because I know I went yesterday to the East New York. They're doing something over there, and Charles Barron is pushing for more affordability, and also he indicated, and it was something that I learned that we should be doing too, is that the square footage on some of these apartments, you pay this money or they get into a program, and the square footage when you walk in there is like the kitchen is there, the bedroom is there, and the sofa is there. He said they don't want that. They want a bedroom. They want a 1 bedroom for 1 bedroom. They don't want to see where you open it. And it was pretty good the way he spoke about what they want to do in that area over there.
So what was that? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just what Mr. Camacho was saying. Many of these places, the way they're building them now, it's just like you're in transit. You live for a short period of time, pack up your gear, and then just keep it moving. But it's not really meant to raise a family, which is a shame. Or even if you have a family, you can't even keep your own family in your own community. So if you have children or anything, and you, like it used to be in the community, the goal was like, oh, okay, you move across the street, you visit your children, and so forth. But now what? They have to go to another state. So it really, many of these apartments to me are more like just transit. That's it. It's like having a boarding home. That's it. You come in, you have a little kitchen, the kitchenette, you have a bed that's actually in the wall, bring it down, and then you bring it up to make space for sofa. I mean, if you ever see the old movies and everything, that's what some of these places are. And we have to keep in mind you still have families. So I don't know. That's just I'm just taken back by much of the way this is being built. And I've noticed right here when you have your options up here and everything, do have a question, and I know in East New York they have the Ellis, you know, they built those out there. Now, if you move into, let's say you are within a certain range there, let's say you're an option, your income is 40,000 and you happen to move in and you live in there, what happens if suddenly you've been blessed and now from 40,000 you get a great job and everything and your salary goes up to 75,000? How would they now calculate your rent? Or will you be told to leave, or what happens?
That's a great question. I actually don't know the specifics on that. I think there is some degree of flexibility where you can make more money and keep your apartment, but I actually don't know how that works. Sure. Another question I want to know is how this is enforced. Like who follows up to make sure this is actually playing out? I wish I knew the answer to that.
Most likely DOB, because they are the enforcers for the city's zoning. But I imagine it would have to be some type of collaboration between DOB for the actual building plans, but HPD for any of the housing. So DOB is structural, HPD is anything on the interior.
Yeah, so we can run through an example real quick just to see how this plays out. We'll use the dots like we did before. So the first neighborhood in the city that applied to MIH was East New York. And which of the options do y'all think would apply to East New York? 3, yep. And because 1 and 2 have to be, it's always got to be one of them. 1 and 3, that's right. That's right. So you're a developer, you're in East New York, you're required to build your building according to option 1 or option 3. If you choose option 1, it means 20% of your building has to be targeting 40% of MFI. And if you choose option 1, 25% of your building has to be targeting families at 60%. Which one would you choose?
Are we talking 22?
We're talking right now, right? Yeah, right now. Let's say.
Option 1, you build less units with more rent, and for option 3, I'm sorry, you build more units with less income.
Sorry, I think maybe I misspoke. For option 3, if you choose option 3, 20% of your building has to target 40% income. If you choose option 1, 25% of your building, so a little bit more, has to target families at 60%.
Most developers think that folks who are in the range the yellow folks, so people who are making less than 28,000, do not fit in that's why the second door, and that's why the amenities question. They don't fit in. They're not like us. Culturally.
Yeah. You know, I think that, sorry, Celeste, were you going to say? I think y'all are all circling around the same thing, which is they're just going to run the numbers and see what turns out to be most affordable for them.
Then why put one or two? Just to put it in there? You have a choice? Oh, we're giving you a choice. But
It's,
I'm not gonna pick that.
So the only thing that you could say to that is if this is a rezoning, right? If they don't select the option in order to get their site rezoned, that's the leverage. So let's say, they're trying to say, well, we want to do this, but the community is adamant about including a specific option. If you have a council member that's working with the community and wants to essentially, hold this project, for the time until they commit, that's been known to happen. So the leverage here is if we don't get what the community wants, there's no way that I can vote yes on this. So you won't get the rezoning. And then they won't be able to do a project at all. So it's a potentially small sacrifice for them to have a much larger gain when they develop the whole building.
So how do you make it perfect? How do that?
We're all imperfect. Reality is imperfect. If you are a property owner, you are a developer, you have potentially the power, more influence over the future of what happens with particular sites. But if you're not, then it's less advantageous.
But I think that's part of what's so confusing to me is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that it wasn't until the 70s that we shifted our approach to affordable housing from public build to the free market system. And so given how bad that's obviously failing us, I don't understand why we're collectively willing to accept the idea that, well, it's not profitable, so it's not gonna happen. That doesn't make sense to me because we don't have to accept that. There's plenty of state land and city land that can be converted into housing if we choose to do that.
That's the same thing I say because they're saying, well, it's needed, they want it, so let's push it with them and let's give it to them. But unless we put our foot down and says, well, guess what? We don't want that. This is what we want. You don't give us what we want. Then guess what? We was there with the rocks and the empty lots. So it'll stay there until we can get someone that's going to work with us. And that's what we really need to do, put pressure on them and make sure because it's a numbers game. It's all about a numbers game. And the mayor has a piece of paper that says, this is how much affordable housing I want to build in this time before I leave. And if I don't get that number, it doesn't look good for me to run the next 4 years. No, it's not about the numbers. It's about the people you're keeping in there and making sure that they can afford to live there.
So I read an article in the Times. I don't know when it was. Maybe it was Sunday. That progressives in New York are increasingly coming to the conclusion to work with developers in order to build more the affordable housing. Did you read that article?
I haven't read it, no. And what was it saying about that?
Saying that the fight against developers has not produced very good results, and that they're trying something new.
The other thing that frustrates me about this is that, to your point, developers are playing by the rules that we give them. So they're not, I mean, sometimes they are acting outside of the rules, obviously, but we set these limits. So I don't understand, I don't think you need to demonize developers. You need to just change the rules that they're playing by so that it works for everybody.
I had a comment in response to this, the, publicly owned land portion, and the city has limited land for development in Bushwick now, and state-owned land is limited. I think the largest public landowner would be the federal government because we have land that's part of Hope Gardens. We've seen some projects like the one right up the street on Linden, the NYCHA Seniors First infill project. The reason why I bring this up is also because the city is not looking to be a landlord. So in order for any of those city-owned sites to eventually become housing, there would have to be some kind of steward. Sometimes that happens through nonprofit housing developers, but it's not as straightforward unless there's the prioritization and political will to say we have a parking lot that's owned by any agency, can we turn this into housing? And that may be something, even with our current city-owned properties that we see over the next few years as the administration tries to tackle the housing crisis with very limited city-owned land, since most of it's already been slated for development.
Sorry, I don't want to take up so much space here, but the only thought that gives me is that I definitely believe that that's true, but the city or state also has the power to buy up land that would otherwise be developed for profit. The city or state could purchase that land and create developments that are not built for profit, but rather built for the people in yellow and red.
And that was feasible in the 70s because land was very cheap. But now even land is incredibly expensive. And there are many instances where the city has to justify, large capital projects. Usually, I don't know the threshold for that. But usually it's not just to essentially develop housing, but it's to provide services, to consolidate buildings. There are larger patterns where even like long-standing agency offices are now relocating because the market has changed to that extent. But it's definitely worth further conversation and something that's come up in a lot of the board meetings.
Yeah, that's a great discussion, y'all. I wish I had more to offer it. I think in broad strokes, it maybe used to be more politically viable to for the state to intervene in such a direct way as to provide affordable housing directly, like through public housing. But in this country in particular, that is really politically fraught, and nobody wants to go there. And so these solutions play along with the free market in a way, by in a way having developers pay for the affordable housing that we get. But as we can see through these like incredibly low percentages where only 20% or 25% of a building has to be affordable, it's a drop in the bucket at most and doesn't really line up with the incredible need for affordable housing that we have. So the solution is not matching the problem at all, but solutions that could be more widespread or actually aligned with the severity of the problem. We don't have the political will to make that happen.
I think one thing that might be helpful, it remains to be seen, is the conversation about comprehensive planning and what creative ideas may come out of that, because you can have policy citywide, but does it really apply, or how does it impact every neighborhood? And perhaps we'll see more community-based, recommendations that are able to support whatever happens, in terms of the future of housing programs. But that I know is a conversation for another time, and it's a little bit far off in terms of the city's priorities right now.
Well, that's a nice, hopeful place to end on. I hope that, today brought a little more understanding of affordable housing, at least the technical side, and these two programs, VIH and MIH. Let's pull out the surveys again and do a quick fist of 5. So yeah, without looking at your answer, if you can try to not look at it, fist of 5, how would you rate your understanding of affordable housing? Still a 5. 2? Okay, great. So go ahead and record that answer in the little survey. And the last question is, how confident would you feel speaking up about affordable housing in a public setting? Fist to 5. Great. All right, please record those answers. And there's a couple more questions on the back. It's totally optional, but if you have any feedback for us, we would love that. And thank you so much for your time and for coming out on a Thursday evening to talk about affordable housing.